Hi, this is Kalin Jordan here with Katherine Tipper for our fifth episode of Planarchy. Our guest today is Gloria Cisneros, a certified financial planner and a passionate advocate for financial empowerment. Drawing on her experience as a first-generation immigrant and a UCLA graduate, Gloria empowers her community to break barriers and embrace authentic financial conversations. We're really excited to have you on the podcast today, Gloria. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
We're just going to dive right into kind of our usual first questions. What were you doing 15 years ago?
15 years ago, I was in high school 15 years ago.
Okay.
Which is,
So some memories, some you want to remember, some you don't. But yeah, I was 15 at the time.
did you have any idea of this field and stuff like that at this point? Or
That's a great question. I grew up loving numbers, so I knew I wanted to do something centered around numbers. I was a kid who liked calculus in high school, for example. Not very common, I know. So I knew that there was a lot of the interest, but I didn't know it would turn into a career in financial advising. I thought I would go into the FBI based on the show Numbers, where they solve crime with numbers or something. Then I
Right.
considered kind of being a teacher, so not at all.
What do you think those experiences, the experience of like liking numbers and everything when you're young, how do you think that shaped your perspective and your approach to financial planning now?
Yeah, I think one, it taught me that being good with numbers doesn't mean being good with money. I think we're told that growing up, like if you're good with math, like you'll be good with money. And that's not necessarily the case. I was really good with numbers, likely because English was my second language growing up. I was an immigrant that came here pretty young to the US. So I carried that through. Even my undergrad, I majored in applied math, for example. But the second I got into the real world and thought about what I wanted to do, the first job I had was accounting at the time. I knew nothing about personal finance and how to manage my money, let alone complex financial planning topics. So I think that interest is great because I definitely love the spreadsheets and I love seeing how numbers work, but it was not necessarily translatable. And I think when I meet people who are geniuses in their own right, it helps me kind of hold space for the fact that they might not be geniuses in what we do and in a finance related topic.
oh, that's a beautiful comment, because I think I would be biased on someone who's good at numbers that they would be. Do you know what I mean? It's just, because it's like they speak the language, but they don't understand, all the concepts, like you said. So that was beautiful. So now we have our lightning round. So tell us a time in your professional life when you felt like the odd person out in a room. So I don't know what the most memorable one is, but was there a time when it was really clear you were the outsider in the room?
Yeah, great question. There have been many times. I think one of the first big conferences I went to, it was an amazing experience. It was one of the first financial conferences, InvestNet. And I learned so much. I was a sponge. I was able to go on a scholarship at the time. However, I realized there was not a lot of people like me in this industry. And it made me hyper aware of how far I still have to go to make it, and that I don't have the social capital that some people were having in those spaces, that I didn't move the way other people did. Not only was there not a lot of, Latinos, there was not a lot of women still.
Right. Yep.
Right. And so it was just a stark reality of, okay, you're in your silo, you're at your workspace. Maybe there's 5-10 people there. I already accepted that we're not diverse here. But to then go into even bigger space and be like, damn, now among thousands, I'm still like feeling very siloed. So it does hit you.
It doesn't. I totally agree. Okay, so fun thing. So what song would you choose as your personal theme song when you walk into a room?
So it's one of my favorite songs. I love dancing salsa and bachata, and it's Vivir Mi Vida by Mark Anthony. And it's just an anthem that is so beautiful to let go. And it talks about how sometimes life does what it does. It can rain on you, but you just like get up and you live your life. And it's just very upbeat and joyful.
Fantastic.
Love it.
Our IT person completely agrees. He was very happy. If you had to teach a master class on something you're passionate about that's not work related, what would the title be?
Authenticity is your superpower, something of the sort.
Yep.
I love that.
That's beautiful. Yep. we should just leave it there.
Perfect.
It's
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah,
We were
I was
sitting there
like,
saying,
do I expand? I was like, I think that was the thing that came to mind. And if I had to expand it just like a sentence or two, the common thread amongst how we carry ourselves in this life, whether in relationships with partners, with friendships, and career, I think it just becomes a lot easier when you stop trying to please others and being this version of ourselves that we think we have to be. The more authentic you are, the less you have to try, the deeper connections are, the farther you will go. And so I've just felt like, especially in what we do with clients, even building trust, it all comes more naturally when you're just authentic. But we're molded from a young age, I think, to be and look and sound a certain way, especially coming into finance. If you feel like you don't belong, and there's a lot of people that weren't like you. So I've just found that it has become my key to unlocking doors that I thought would be harder to unlock. It's just being myself and sharing my story.
Wow.
So
Fantastic.
that's
Okay.
great.
Go for it, Kalin.
Yeah, I would, you describe yourself on your website as a primera, the first in your family to immigrate, graduate college, and build wealth. So can you share what it meant to carry that responsibility and how it shaped your relationship with money?
yeah, it's a huge weight. It's the hidden cost of being a first. You are proud. A lot of people focus in on that. You should be very proud of yourself. You're doing so much and you're getting so far ahead. But it's very heavy, the pressure, the perfection you put on yourself. You feel like you have to make sacrifices worth it because at some point in the lineage, right, you're the first doing something, and it doesn't have to be coming to this country. It can be the first building wealth, whatever that state is. That means the person before you didn't know how to do it. So not only are you learning it for the first time, having to figure it out, but then the pressure of not messing up, and then the pressure of teaching the next person as well. So it can feel very heavy, and you feel like the stakes are high. There's no backup plan, right? It's just you. and
Mhm.
and so when it comes to money, that's just amplified because there is no safety net to take risks. Maybe even as simple as like, taking time off after college. A lot of first gen students don't feel like they can. They have to go right into working to help provide for their family. They think about their parents' retirement. They think about their retirement plan. They're trying to set up their future families for success. You may be sending money back home, things of all the sort. And so it adds to the level of sometimes not giving yourself grace that I think you need when it comes to personal finance, because there's a lot of ebbs and flows with our financial lives, and we're not perfect. We're human beings. So on top of you needing to understand personal finance, because that wasn't usually talked about in our homes growing up, as my case specifically was a Latino household, a lot of immigrants, it was hush hush. I thought living paycheck to paycheck was success, to be honest. And so you're just having to reconstruct and learn from the ground up. And on top of that, you feel the pressures of helping everyone around you.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. I'm also the first in my family to go to college, and there is no playbook. You're just kind of
Mm.
figuring it. Are you the oldest in your family?
Yeah, so I was the oldest in my household growing up. I have two younger half siblings that I grew up with, but then when I got older, I met an older half sibling. So now I'm like a middle,
Okay.
but
Just
I grew
the
up
way you're
being
speaking
the
about it
oldest.
resonated because I'm also the oldest. So it sounds like that kind of also the burden of being like not just the first in your family, but the eldest child to have to
Yes.
take on that responsibility and show your younger siblings.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure to put on somebody who's a teenager.
Yeah, no, because then everybody looks at you, and there is this, as much as I'm very proud of everything I've done, there's this golden child. You have to set the example, you have to walk the walk so others can see you doing that. And that has been very hard to deconstruct in therapy, let me tell you.
And I agree. Okay, so I'm the oldest daughter, so it's not completely identical, but I feel that pressure too. And you said something important about giving yourself grace because there's
Mm.
ebbs and
Mm,
flows, and there's so much about personal finance that you're just supposed to show this face like you got it all together, you have the best returns, everything's turning up roses, and if you don't have that figured out right away, then you've almost wasted your life, right? So
yeah.
there's a lot of emotional pressure um
Hmm.
on on performance, and it's a factor, but it's not the whole thing. And giving yourself grace, I think, was just an amazing thing to say.
Well, and to your point, you bring up a great point, because people think money is all numbers, right? We think it's all related to the returns, but the results of our finances are largely going to be behavior driven. They're emotion driven. We can draft up the perfect financial plan, the perfect investments, which there really aren't any perfect winning stocks or investments. So that's a lie. That's a myth, for like 99.999% of the time. And so you can draft up this perfect artwork of what we do for a living. But if you don't connect with the client and you can't get them from getting in their, can't keep them from getting in their own way because they get fearful or anxious or scared, none of it matters. They're going to pull everything out. They're not going to understand it. So I think the emotions play a bigger part than we give it credit for. And there's a little bit more awareness coming out around in the industry of how much we have to connect with people and really go deeper and the life planning of it. But still a long way to go.
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. You've spoken a lot about growing up in survival mode where planning for the future felt out of reach. How did those early experiences influence your passion for financial literacy and your approach to helping others?
I get it, right? I know what it's like when I'm talking to people that are often dismissed in this space. And I don't make assumptions. I listen because I know the judgment of coming into being a college educated UCLA applied math graduate and going into conversations with my CPA colleagues at my first job out of college and feeling dumb, feeling like, did I miss something? Why? I learned English, I learned Spanish. Do I now need to learn the language of financial planning, of money? And so I don't make assumptions because I know that they were talking about what they thought was simple, which was credit and buying a home and a 401k. And I felt small. I felt dismissed, right? And no one meant to make me feel that way, but it was just, there was no awareness growing up. The crux of like what I was taught was open up a checking and savings account. And we were the type of family which blessed with so much love. But like I said, we were living paycheck to paycheck. I would help my grandpa, which was ended up being fun. Like we would go and, collect cans and get some extra cash for the birthdays or here and there. There was no lavishness. It was a lot of, it was an abundance of love and support, but not of financial funds. And so you meet people differently and you don't judge. And you also hold space for the fact that finances can look very different for everyone. And so that shaped my interest in even coming into this field because I just saw how a lot of the personal finance, that I was hearing was relatable and I was excited to learn it, the foundations, a lot of the ABCs and terminology, but it wasn't given from my perspective. It wasn't given from a perspective that money can be for your community. It can be for impact because a lot of finance is very individualistic, right? So it just, coming into the space exposed me to a lot of what I wish I'd known younger, but that's okay. You don't know what you don't know. And then holding space for people to just tell me what they are and what they want their money to be and how we work with that. So their why. And I think that helps, right? Because you come from a place of you didn't know, and I get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
The wealth gap for women of color, especially Latinas, is significant. So it's 83 cents on the dollar for white women, but it is 54 cents on the dollar for Latinas, which I don't think a lot of people know that difference, and they kind of only hear one statistic. What are some of the biggest barriers that you see for non-white women in terms of building wealth, and how do you help clients navigate those challenges or battles?
Yeah, for Latina women especially, there is a lot of that has to do with our culture. There is ways of being of our households, where the men tended to be the ones dominating the finances, the women were the caretakers. There is still some of those gender roles, some of the machismo. And then you add on a layer of that, they're probably the first, second, or third at most sometimes generation coming into this country from Latin America. And when you're an immigrant, it is so ingrained into you to be grateful, that this is an opportunity, that you should be happy you're here. Anything is better than where we were, right? A lot of times you're leaving your home country because things were tough. You don't come here just for fun, right? It's a whole journey to get to America. And so this is already our lens through which we view our opportunities here in the United States. So imagine if you're just getting a job. My first job, I was incredibly grateful to just make, at the time, was $50,000, which seemed like I was rich because I was more. With being a first, you're going to have also the experiences where you're in between two worlds of I'm doing better than the people who came before me, but I'm still trying to catch up and make headway so that I catch up to other people that I see are doing better than me, right? And so, anywho, what ends up taking over when you're, I think, younger and you're first coming to yourself is that you are grateful. So you don't feel like you can advocate or negotiate. The stakes are high, and maybe this is the only door that opens. So if you close it, there is no other door to go through. So all these pressures and feelings of I don't have the social capital, the financial capital, you take less risks. And that correlates directly to negotiating our pay. My first 2 jobs, I didn't negotiate. I didn't even know what that was. So first off, not only do we have the emotional barriers, maybe the influences of how we were raised, but on top of that, we don't even know it's a thing. Like, I truly believe that your employer just gave you the best offer because they like you and it was a mutual interview and you were golden. And I didn't realize that that's not how it works, that you're expected to negotiate, for example. So when I talk to clients, I talk about the practical things. We go through a script. I've talked to people about, let's look at the numbers out there to get the average of what this work would pay somewhere else. And we get all the data. That's one thing. But the second one is helping them gain the courage. Like, how are you practicing? How are you getting into a breathing exercise? How are you getting amped up to have that conversation and not feel bad and not cave in and not just say, okay, that's fine. I'm just grateful to work here. Like, no, you can rebuttal, you can keep going, and without feeling like you're the one who has everything to lose and they're the only ones that can give you that opportunity. So it's shifting that gratitude mindset, because you can still hold gratitude, but be a self-advocate for yourself.
Wow, that's very good. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we all needed that at about 19.
absolutely.
Yes.
I know my daughter, when she was getting her first jobs, she had friends who thought it was impolite to ask how much money you were going to make. So they wouldn't even ask it in the interview. Do you know what I mean? So that
Really?
yeah.
Wow.
I mean, this is when, they're late high school, but they thought it was impolite to ask what the starting wage was. And I mean, the conversation went on for a while. It wasn't like a simple yes. So my daughter's like, of course you ask. But her friends are like, it's very impolite to ask. And it's like, oh my God, it's a job. You need to know. You at least
Yeah,
need to know
that's
the number you're starting at. So,
great.
there's there's kind of a cultural passivity to it that we learn somehow. And there's just various levels for, it
Yeah.
altogether, some passivity to it. So, new section. So, as a Latina and a certified financial planner, what unique challenges have you faced as a woman of color in the financial service industry? How have you turned those challenges into opportunities for change?
I think some of the challenges, I mean, it's two-sided. I've been in some uncomfortable conversations where people have said remarks that they didn't think were not correct. And at the beginning of my career, I didn't speak up as much as I probably should have, to be like, hey, I don't know if that was the right way to say that, even if you meant the best. Like, that's always a fallback. Oh, I didn't mean to. Okay, well, that doesn't take away accountability and growing and learning. So I've stepped into that a little more. I give you grace, but that doesn't mean we don't get better. And the next person has to hear a comment like that, right? The next me that won't speak up because I didn't speak up 5 years ago. And so there's those things where you become aware of, wow, this room has really been dominated by older white men usually. So they talk and move a certain way that sometimes isn't the most inviting to other people, and they don't even realize it. And then I think the other part is, because I become hyper aware, sometimes I'm the only one in the room or very few people in the room or at a conference or at an event. I think it shapes the way that now I want to show up and as myself even more and more authentically, because I know the power it would have had for me being younger. And that's just now how I've navigated my career from the first 2 to 3 years in corporate America. I was, for example, always straightening my hair and had the blues and the blacks and the whites and trying to be in accounting and finance and follow the path of my seniors and learn how to talk like them and learn how to speak like them, which is all great. But I felt like I had to be a little robot version of everyone who was above me and assimilate and fit in and be palatable, right? And you learn that a lot of survival instincts also from being an immigrant. So I was like, I'm good at this. I can blend in. Versus now, I'm like, no, I want to stand out, and I should not be following the path that is set before me because I'm different than this person. The goals, the values, everything else is different. So I'm going to show up differently so the next person feels like they can resonate, feels like they do fit in, feels like there's someone else like them here. Whether that's a Latina, a woman of color, whether it's an immigrant, whatever you want to call it, I think it makes a difference. And it's like the first only different, right? Being an FOD. And so I carry that because I've had to be in certain situations and or have seen my career path now on the opposite side of it, I think catapult in a positive way because I started to lean into the authenticity.
Do you give us any examples? Like if you're comfortable, it's totally okay if you don't, like of any of those things that have been said to you in those spaces, so people actually like have a more concrete understanding of what that feels like.
Yeah, I remember being at a company at one point, and it was me and another female colleague, and we were told it was more beneficial to hire, and I think there's a lack of awareness there, but more beneficial to hire. Essentially, we had just had a new hire, a white man who come from money for the company. It was more profitable. And with me sitting there, and so when you're young in this industry, the way I took it, because I didn't have a lot of the maybe tools of self-awareness to be like, okay, I don't want to take it personally. I took it personally. I was like, what do you mean? Well, you're looking at someone who is not what you're saying that is. And so does that mean I'm not profitable? I'm not good for this company? I did bring it up. And so he took accountability and was like, oh, I didn't mean it that way. I mean, it's great for connections and building clients and all the other aspects. But again, I'm like, well, I'm starting from scratch and I want to pursue this industry. I want to pursue this career. That makes me feel like it's not possible for me. So the way you speak about things, just make sure you watch how you say it, because people in the room could feel like dismissed and then not welcome. And then you're not feeling heard, seen, and valued at the company. And that just like is a slippery slope of then you're not really happy, right? Because you're feeling you're not supported. So again, that was someone in senior leadership saying something like that because he was thinking of the numbers. Oh, of course, if we recruit and hire people who either come from money, have vast networks, great top Ivy Leagues, or whatever those metrics are, which tend to be white men, then of course we'll be successful because they'll come in with supposedly, right, more knowledge, more connections, more money, all the things that are assumed about that. But funny enough, I don't think that's always true. But nonetheless, that was said, and I was like, well, that's good to know. As someone who just came into corporate America like 3-4 years ago, whatever.
How old were you when that was said?
Probably like 20, 24, 25.
So good on you for speaking up, because I don't know if I would have said something when I was that age.
Yeah, I was definitely my early 20s.
I think there's just a general assumption in financial services that you are always looking for the big client, the one with a lot of assets, and then people look for, well, where are they? And then those are the people I'm going to go after. And there's just not a lot of deep, complex, challenging questions to what success looks like. You're supposed to have, I'll hear financial advisors, they'll say, I will not work with anyone who doesn't have $500,000 worth of assets. And you're like, so what happens to the people in their 20s and 30s? There's just a certain amount of, I'd say the whole industry is focused on these people over here. And like, if you don't fit in it, then you have to kind of figure it out yourself until you get to that side, and then people will talk to you. And so that's why, actually, that's like the whole reason of Planarchy, is just to challenge the idea that, the people in their 20s and 30s need to know things, that you can be more not even more successful. You just need to know things, even if you don't have tons of money in it. But anyway, it's a whole challenge to the industry on how they look at money, I would say. So I got on my soapbox. So, but I think there's a thing that when you get out of school, you feel like you need to fit in and not be challenging at first. And it's very easy to feel like you are challenging in ways that aren't appreciated because people didn't really want to hear new things. So it's quite an art to get it right.
Yeah, I agree. Because even the stat, and you take things personally, right? Which is, I think now you have a little more awareness where you can be like, that's not okay, but I understand maybe where the owner's coming from. So I'm just going to remove myself because it's not my company. And I'm not going to change people. That's not my job. But there was a company I was at too, where I mentioned the stats around the Latina earning less and the woman even earning less than $1. So I had come super excited to one of my annual reviews, and I was like, well, this is the compensation if we're all about uplifting, women in general in this industry, and I'm super passionate about this and equal pay and making sure women like make more and helping women and all these topics, I brought that in my review and I was like, well, here's the average compensation, but if we, inflate it, to catch up for how far we've been behind, and it was not taken well. And so I think it's one thing that time I broke down in tears. I was like, is it something with me? Did I do something wrong? Should I have not brought it up? Did I mess up? And I'm like, no, I think the person maybe just wasn't ready for that conversation. Maybe I could have done some different things to let her know that's what it was going to, let her, them, they, all the people who are above me know that that's how I was going to take the conversation. It wasn't just about my individual performance, but also about how I see the industry and advocacy as a whole. But it's interesting because a lot of people say they support these type of topics. And whenever, the history days come up, Latina, pay day and Women Equal Pay Day and Women's History Month, all these, everybody gets on board and they're making social media posts and they're promoting it. But when it comes down to it in those review meetings or promotions or time to pay up on those different things that actually show action, not just a promotion campaign or a marketing campaign that month, a lot of people fall short, to be honest.
Not surprising at all that people could do a performative social media post, but when it actually comes push to shove in your workspace, people don't live the values that they click on Facebook, right? Okay, we're going to do a fun little new segment. We're going to ask you just a question to get to know you a little bit better. So I'd love to know what advice you would give your younger self, and it could be at any age.
Maybe two parts, but believe in yourself more. You have to be your biggest cheerleader. So when you start to feel unstable, when you get wobbly, everything else gets wobbly and you don't have anything to stand on. So you have to really believe in yourself and know your why so people can't shake you and can't gaslight you and can't force you into thinking, that you're not doing what's right for you. And so believing in myself and trusting my gut. I think we don't do that enough. And there's always times where you're like, oof, that doesn't feel right, or I don't know. And it's just, in general, I think life advice, and that will serve you in this industry and will serve you in your career, but have really strong self-belief, because this industry especially is very difficult for young people, for women, even more so for people of color.
Yeah, thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the generational kind of differences, which you definitely hinted on a lot. And you've had kind of this lived experience of being, first generation. And we talk a lot on the podcast about the different approaches to retirement based on what generation you are a part of. How do you think those generational differences, and especially being from a first generation family, shape attitudes towards retirement and wealth building?
So I don't think there is enough people who are first gen and in general immigrant families thinking about retirement. That's not something we think about when you're in survival mode. When you're just worried about paying the rent for next month and getting food on the table, you prioritize, right? You compartmentalize. What's important today is putting food on the table today. I'm not worried about my 50, 60, 70-year-old self right now. And so I think just that's the lens we come from. And so we just have to be aware of that. That's not even something on the table, or it wasn't maybe growing up. So it takes a lot of shifting a mindset to start putting yourself first, because no one is looking out for that future you besides yourself. Sadly, there's less pension plans now. It's more 401ks, and you have to self-fund your retirement. And so we can't rely on also maybe inheriting a house or inheriting a parent's 401k. That's not going to be something that's very realistic for first gen folks as well. So it takes that mindset shift, because sometimes what happens is one of two things. You come into money and you have this YOLO mentality, because you're like, I deserve to enjoy my money. I didn't grow up with money. So now it's all these things I want to make up for and have experiences or things that I couldn't have when I was growing up, right? You're filling the hole. Or the other side of things, it's scarcity mindset. And all you want to do is save, because you're so scared of not having money again. You're scared of feeling that deprivation, that scarcity. And so those two camps, none of which, they're usually cash heavy over here and then don't have any savings. They may be going into debt and not understanding how credit works and borrowed money works. None of which think about long-term up here. And so you kind of have to work on that mindset and the education, the foundation quite a bit, so that they feel comfortable in taking those steps of railing spending back in and to realize like it's a balance. And on the other side, it's also a balance, right? And let's put some money to work and take little bits of calculated and educated risk when it comes to investing to make sure you're not just hoarding cash and also not spending to live the life that you've worked very hard to get to usually.
Yeah, thank you. Catherine, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay. So, the big topic for everyone is AI, right? Technology and the huge change. So, we all are working through it. So it's changing. How does it change, like how you talk about and manage money? How do you use digital tools or AI to make financial planning more accessible and less intimidating to people? Does it help make it less intimidating, or is it more intimidating?
I think AI is going to propel us in ways that we couldn't have seen coming. It's going to help advance so many things. It is helpful. It is helping with the admin tasks. It's helping with research. I think it gets a little, our people are worried about it doing more of our jobs, but I think that's because our job traditionally did start off as trading stocks and picking stocks and being brokers. It has evolved to mean so much more. Now you see financial planning and CFPs out there. So now our job is more holistic. And I think those jobs are going to be safer than ever because they have the human element, the planning element, the ones that they connect to the values, the goals of a human being that I don't think the way AI can, right? Nothing's going to replace the emotions, the empathy, the holding space. However, I think people now do have access to information, which I don't think is a bad thing. We have to be receiving that with positivity. Like clients are coming in, maybe having research of topic and maybe are an expert in that topic more than you because they did a deep dive for 3 hours with ChatGPT on something and then come to you with the question saying, what does this mean and what do I do? So I think it's important to realize now there's more information, but you're the interpreter of that information and you know how it applies to them. Because the client can go down a rabbit hole on a tax strategy, Roth conversion, this new sector coming up, and they can come to you saying, I'm so excited. I feel like I'm missing out. There's FOMO, there's information, there's all these things. What they can't do is because they're not seeing this every day and don't have maybe the experience, expertise you have of navigating different client situations on a day-to-day basis and having the foundational knowledge, they can't dissect what applies to them oftentimes. So I think especially then you have all the viral social media and all the other technology that comes into play outside of AI, right? But I think that's the purpose it's going to serve is help provide more information. And I love that in terms of financial education and financial literacy. I think more people will have access to answering basic questions or learning the fundamentals. And then we use it as a tool in conjunction, right? And help us streamline our workload. And that's going to make us really focus with if there's AI products and AI companies coming out that are helping make the investment side easier. I'm a big believer. I'm not trying to time the stock market right or beat any index, very passive investing, long-term approach. So I think AI is going to make all that easier. And then I can really focus on the deep client goals, values, work of accountability, of getting to all the different milestones they've been wanting to work on and the education, which I think is the stickiest part of what we do anyway.
And I think a lot of clients actually are making that shift because they can get the information, but they do feel the huge gap of what do I do with it? And that's where your experience really, really helps. Do you think the technology can be especially useful to first gen and immigrant communities? Is there anything special about it that can help them? Or do you think it's equal to everyone else?
I think the one thing that comes to mind with that is a little bit of the guilt and shame you feel as a first gen if you don't know about money. And opening up to a human might be more intimidating about that than initially asking questions to ChatGPT. If you say what to stock to ChatGPT, it's just the information, right? And versus, asking your financial advisor, which is handling your money, you might feel like, obviously depends on who it is. I would hope they don't, but you might feel like your advisor would be like, what do you mean you don't know what a stock is? I'm managing your $500,000 you got from XYZ. And you might feel like, oh, I can't ask questions or I'm not able to open up and I don't want people to make assumptions about me. This person's already handling my money. They're an expert. So I think the education aspect is very helpful for people who are starting from scratch and can just learn the basics. If their financial advisor maybe hasn't created that space that have told them there's no dumb questions. I'm here to be your financial sounding board. Let's work on this together. Not everyone has that approach. Some people are more old school and just we manage your money and we email you twice a year and we'll have one meeting and that's it. You know, they don't want the fuzzy and the conversations and the ongoing education, which is fair.
And there is such a specific language to finance in general, and it's
Yeah.
almost a barrier to, like, if you don't know that language and you actually don't know the language in terms of it's not your first language, it could really help just translate that all in such a way that you don't feel like you're always one foot back. You know, you
Right.
show up knowing things. So yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
just what Gloria was saying before. Like, he's like, I learned English, I speak Spanish, and now I have to learn another language. This is the financial literacy language. And I think like those barriers are always there for people when there's like a lot of terminology and people feel turned off and, like they won't be smart enough to engage in that material. And we definitely, I think that like, yeah, like you were saying, AI can definitely break down some of those barriers.
The language actually, funny enough too, I think if you're not fluent in English, or the advisor or the client, and that's like what they're trying to learn, then AI is decent at translating some of the language, and depending on the prompts you give it of, can we make this into colloquial Spanish, can we make it this in like professional Spanish or whatever it is, and at least it's a maybe not the 100% perfect, but again, it's just nice to have something there to work on and off of. So it's very helpful.
Great. Well, we just have like some closing questions for you.
Yeah.
So we always like to ask people, what's one financial myth or message that you grew up with that you've had to unlearn? And it sounds like you could pick from a lot.
Yes. I think in general, believing that becoming like a millionaire, for example, which is one of those terms you hear a lot growing up, being a millionaire, making six figures, all those, isn't for you or is really out of reach and it's reserved for a certain type of person. And you realize that it's not. Anyone can do it, right? Where it's a matter of how long of a runway do you have, and you can put small amounts away for decades and become a millionaire, right? And we have the largest amount of 401k millionaires in the country ever right now. So I just deconstructing the fact that it wasn't possible for me, because if that was the mindset and the framework, then the actions that followed it would probably be more self-destructive, and I wouldn't be thinking about my future self as much.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. Question I'd really love to ask you is, if you could rewrite the way financial conversations happen, whether that's in school, at home, in the workplace, what would you change?
Great question. We need more of it. I don't think it's even being done enough to even consider change. Like, first, let's get it out to the masses, and then let's talk about how we change it. Because in California, there's legislation passed recently that they're going to start teaching a course of financial education in kind of schools. But it's still not nearly enough. And it's one of those actually like fundamentally needed life skills that we should make sure everyone has access to. So I think first it's like, even if it's imperfect, let's get it out there as much as we can. And then the changes maybe, tweak depending on the age range, on the audience. You definitely want to have something that it's relatable to people, because money does turn people off. But first, let's make sure it's in the masses, and then we can focus on the more minute and minor things, in my opinion, of how does this resonate with this community and this community and this community. Because I have a lot of thoughts on that, making sure it does resonate and it does hit. Because if you have someone running a seminar that doesn't resonate with the community, then it doesn't matter what they said. However, it's better that there was a seminar at all, right? That there was even someone to talk on the topic.
I know
Wow.
we in a podcast, we had someone who told us she actually started to learn some of the concepts. She was working at a retail store, and there was an older woman who had to work because she needed to do it in her 70s to help pay for her husband's medicine. Do you know what? And that she just, so even the casual conversations like, you're 17, you're working at a retail store. Do you know what I mean? The casual conversations that people have can really have a big impact. And it's not perfect financial advice. It's just sharing where you've been and what's going on can be really powerful for helping people just get the ball rolling. Just start thinking about things. So,
And it's like what you talked about, Gloria, if you grow up in a house that doesn't have wealth already, and your norm is, yeah, I think like living paycheck to paycheck seems pretty normal. I don't think I also grew up in a household that was very paycheck to paycheck, and my parents never talked about retirement. I just don't think it was at the forefront of their minds. So why would it be at the forefront of their minds to talk to us about?
Right.
Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense. We need to be holding those conversations in other spaces where everybody is, in case you're not from a home that like prioritizes that.
No, 100%. So I don't think it is just on the education side. I think we need to normalize talking about money. How much we make, what are our goals are about money? How do we support one another? Like if I knew your goal was to retire in Tahiti and have run a small business, like, okay, great. I know another small business owner, like, let me help you, let me put you on. Or if your goal is to have a coffee shop in your 60, whatever the goal is, right? I think if we talked about our financial, motivators and or doubts or fears, we would be way better off. But we still haven't gotten to that point, I think.
I think that's a great ending statement. So
Mhm.
we super
We could talk to you
appreciate
all day.
so we super appreciate your time. As you know, these podcasts can be found on LinkedIn, YouTube, and now on Spotify and Apple. If you have questions
Mhm.
for us, it's sales@hunterbenefits.com. And I know, Gloria, you have two websites that people can find you on. You both have your personal one, very beautiful, and you have your corporate one. So those are different ways to get a hold of us. So I
Yeah.
appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. And there was a tidbit that helped each individual, and something stayed and resonated with you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you.